Hey guys, welcome back to the channel once again. Today I'm getting into my 10 for 10 movie tag. I don't know if you heard that, the train just blew its whistle outside. Terrible timing for recording this video. Anyway, this is a 10 for 10 movie tag that I was tagged in by the J-Man's Movie Cave over on his channel, Jason Nike. I'll put a link down in the description for his channel, go check it out. He did the same thing as this and then tagged me and 9 other channels in it. So this is basically 10 movies we love from 10 different genres. So without wasting any more time, let's just get right into this. So starting with foreign films, I got The Raid. This is a kick-ass action film from Indonesia. It's essentially about the SWAT team having to go into this huge apartment building and where there's drug lords and they're pretty much have to fight for their life to get out. It's just the hand-to-hand combat in this is just perfect, and it's not quick cuts or anything. Everything's filmed nice. You can see all the fighting scenes. The choreography in this is just outstanding, and it's also pretty brutal as well. You get people fighting with machetes and getting cut open and stuff, and just really great action scenes and fight scenes. This is a movie that requires subtitles. It's not in English, but don't worry, there's not too much talking going on. We get a little bit at the first just to set things up, then it's pretty much action non-stop right throughout to the end. I have yet to see part 2 of this, but I heard it's also pretty good, so I'm gonna have to check that out too someday, but definitely check out The Raid. I highly recommend it. So next up, I picked animation instead of western since I really just haven't seen enough westerns to really choose my favorite movie. So I picked animation, and I had to go with my favorite, Toy Story. This is my favorite Disney or Pixar movie. It came out when I was really young, and I pretty much watched it my whole life, and it's just a great story about growing up. Just all four of these Toy Story movies actually does a really good job of going through life and the changes you go through, how you go from a kid to a teen to an adult, and you have to leave your childhood behind in that. While this movie focuses more on the childhood part, it is just done very well. Voice acting is done really well too, from Tom Hanks to Tim Allen. The excellent job on both sides, and all the side characters too are great. And this movie had a little bit of balls to it too. You wouldn't think, but especially the Sid character next door. He's like this demented preteen that like tortures toys and that, and just a real messed up individual. And he puts like pins and stuff in his toys, and you get some pretty creepy moments in here for a kids movie. I do believe that it was the first completely computer generated film as well, like not hand drawn or anything, but I'm not too sure on that. But all in all, this is just a great animated film. It got a little bit of everything, comedy, action, to a little bit of horror if you want to consider like Sid's Room and that. It's pretty creepy, especially for kids. But yeah, I just always dug this film and is easily my favorite animated film. So next up, I chose comedy, and if you know me, my favorite comedy, it's a horror comedy, Shaun of the Dead. So I didn't choose that. I went with straight up comedy, and I picked Anchorman. This may be stupid, it may be too silly for some, and I get that. But this movie is just so damn fun and quotable. Probably the most quotable movie ever made for me anyway. Spent most of high school just quoting this movie nonstop. Will Ferrell is amazing. The whole cast, Steve Carell, Paul Rudd, everybody does an excellent job. The jokes are just so out there and ridiculous, but it's hilarious to me. Just every single scene in this film has something funny or something really memorable that yeah, you just won't forget, and I just always have a kick-ass time with Anchorman. The sequel was okay, but it obviously didn't live up to the classic original. So next up, I got drama, and for drama I picked Requiem for a Dream. Not an easy watch, this film. I've seen this when it was released back in, I believe it was like 2000 or 2001, around there anyway, and whew, this was a hard watch at that age. I was like 10 back then, and this movie, if it taught anybody anything, is don't become a drug addict if you can do anything about it, because boy, does this show the downside to taking these substances. like where some of them have to prostitute themselves out. Other ones are like their arms are falling off from infections and they take a needle so much, and it's just craziness. But it's just really insightful, and it really also shows like how the hospitals and doctors are running in the states, like how the old lady goes to see the doctor and he doesn't even look at her. He's just prescribing her stuff while looking at his clipboard, doesn't look at her once, and she ends up getting like addicted to something that's like speed throughout the movie, and she just gets wackier and crazier throughout, and all the characters end up in a very dark place by the end of this film, and you're just like, holy shit, it's almost hard, too much to take at one point. But just a really well made film, great performances all around. Jared Leto, everybody does a great job, and it's definitely a film worth checking out, and it will make you think twice about doing drugs. Next up, we got Historic. And I cheated a little bit for this one, but it is historic. It was a real thing that happened. I'm going with Titanic. Now, I know a lot of people don't like this film, but you have to admit it was filmed beautifully by James Cameron. Great score to it, too. The second half of the film is definitely where the tragedy happens and is the most intense, while the first half is a lot more romance, drama, but it sort of sets up characters for when later when they get killed off or get put in certain situations. It kind of all pays off later in the movie when you really get to see them in these situations. So I don't mind spending time with them in the first half, knowing what's coming to them. And it's just what a tragic event that was. Just, I have this fascination with the history of Titanic on its own without this film. But when they hit the iceberg to the end, you're like, holy shit, there's no way off, and it makes you feel like trapped just watching this movie, knowing that they're gonna go into that ice cold water and most of them will die, and this makes you think of how crazy it would be to actually be there, and like what would you do in that situation. And just for being a movie that was made in the late 90s, just like Terminator 2, James Cameron really elevated the cinematography, and he did shit that they would have a hard time to pull off today, especially with the technology he had at the time. Because man, does it ever look real when they're going through the ship and the water's filling up, and I don't know, you can even feel how cold the water is. It felt, and that's just all to do with James Cameron's directing. So I've been a big fan of this film since its release, and I actually haven't watched it for a while, and I put it on maybe a month ago, and it brought back so many memories and so much like, oh my god, this is an amazing film. Next up, we got Fantasy. And just like you guys, I had to go with a Lord of the Rings entry, but I'm changing it up. I'm going with the third entry, Return of the King. This is my personal favorite. This is the only one that I've got to see in theaters. And at the time when I seen it in theaters, I haven't even seen Two Towers. I went from part one to part three, so I was a bit confused in theaters, but later on I did watch them all multiple times, and yeah, this is the one I had the most fun with. I love the part with the caves and all the ghosts. I love the big war at the end, Mount Doom when they finally reach it, and Frodo's dealt with the ring and having to destroy it, and it's taking over him essentially. It's controlling him and making him want to wear it, and it's just an all around great film. I love all the acting. The performances are great throughout all three of these films. Not a bad film in this trilogy. This just happens to be my favorite. Next up, we got Thriller. And for Thriller, I decided to choose my all time favorite movie ever, which is The Butterfly Effect with Ashton Kutcher and Amy Smart, I believe. What an amazing movie. A movie that doesn't get talked nearly as much as it should. If you're into time travel or like crazy time loop sci-fi stuff, this one is for you. Uh, Ashton Kutcher's greatest performance ever, in my opinion. It's dark. It has horror elements all throughout. It's a really dark thriller. It shows you just by changing a little thing in your life, it could set off a whole new path for your future. Hence the term butterfly effect. Even uh, the wrong movement of a butterfly's wings could set off the end of the world essentially. Time travel is my favorite subgenre, if it even is called a subgenre. Time travel movies, them type, are my favorite. It's just a kick-ass film with great performances, a few twists here and there, and the film really goes in a few directions you don't expect with this type of movie. It gets pretty dark. This is definitely one I'm shouting at you guys. If you haven't seen it, please go check it out. You can forget the sequels. This is the only one that matters. Next up, we got sci-fi. Now, I couldn't make a list without putting this on here. The Terminator. And like Jason pointed out, this could be used in action, in sci-fi, and horror even. This first movie is pretty dark as well. And I went with sci-fi. This is another one of my favorite movies. It's a time travel movie again, but it's so much more than that. It's one of the best romances between two characters is in this film. The story is this magnificent, pretty much 100% perfect to me. The performances are great. Linda Hamilton kills it. You also get Arnold Schwarzenegger, obviously. He is a badass Terminator. And this is just a cinematic masterpiece. This is my second or third favorite movie of all time. The pacing is perfect. The cinematography is perfect for 1984. I love it. I know a lot of people put part 2 over this one, but I'm a bigger fan of the original. Even though part 2 is one of the better sequels ever made, I still gotta hand it to the original. It's just a badass film that I've been watching my whole life. Next up, we got action, and I'm picking The Matrix from '99. What a original piece. This film really did a great job at world building, one of the best. I really think this film was ahead of its time, whether you're talking about the choreography with the fight scenes and the slow-mo, which so many movies copied and got influence off of this, to the performances are all great. The concept is so original, and yeah, like I said, the world building, creating this big universe of having like the machines and the matrix itself and having like the simulation that everybody is in. It's just genius to me, and they could never quite pull it off with the sequels, and it's a shame because if the sequels would have been any good, well, any better I should say, this would be up there one of the best trilogies of all time, because this first movie is a easy 10 out of 10 for me. And last up at number 10, I got my favorite subgenre, horror. And I had to go with Scream. I didn't want to pick like a horror comedy because obviously, like I said, Shaun of the Dead would beat it. But straight up horror, we're going with Scream. This is another childhood favorite of mine. Well, childhood terror of mine, but it grew into one of my favorite horror films of all time. It's great performances again. It was such a fresh film for a slasher, especially at the time. Slashers were done. Like everybody was done with them. They oversaturate them by the late 80s. So in the 90s, none of them were making money. No one was seeing them anymore. But this one really rejuvenated that love for the genre. And it's just so meta, so clever, smart. And that's what I love about this movie. Like, it's not just your typical slasher, someone getting stalked, picked off, and there's a final girl. No, they're self-aware in this film. They realize the rules in horror films and use that to their advantage or disadvantage. And just the look at Ghostface himself always kind of creeped me out as a kid. It's a very unique look, and I feel like nowadays we don't get these original villains as we did in the past. This is one of my favorite franchises as a whole as well. Like, not just the first film. I love all these films, but the original definitely holds a special place in my heart. So that's it, guys. That's my 10 for 10 movie tag. That was fun. If you guys want to do it, go ahead and do it and tell me down below in the comments your channel and I'll go check it out. If ever any of y'all want to tag me in any more of these, I'm totally down to do them. And I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.